Christmas was supposed to be quiet that year. That was the plan, at least. My parents left town 2 days before Christmas Eve. A last-minute family emergency, they said. I didn't ask too many questions. I was 18, finally trusted enough to stay alone, and secretly excited about having the house to myself. Our house sat at the end of a short cul-de-sac in a small Midwestern town. Not rural, not busy. The kind of place where nothing ever really happened. And when it did, people stopped talking about it within a week. Snow had already covered everything by the time they left. Thick, heavy snow that swallowed sound and made the world feel padded, distant, safe. That first night alone was normal, too normal. I watched TV, microwaved leftovers, scrolled endlessly on my phone. The house made its usual noises, pipes ticking, wood shifting from the cold, sounds I'd grown up with. Christmas Eve came quietly. No visitors, no knocks, no calls. By nightfall, the snow was falling harder. Streetlights glowed like blurry halos through the windows. Every other house was lit up with decorations. Ours stayed dark. My parents never bothered with Christmas lights. I went to bed around midnight. That's when I heard the footsteps. They were slow, careful, not heavy enough to sound like boots. Not light enough to be an animal, just deliberate, moving across the floor below my bedroom. I sat up, heart instantly racing. I told myself it was the house settling. I told myself it was nothing. Then the footsteps stopped and something shifted directly beneath my bed. Not a thump, not a scrape, more like weight being adjusted. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stared at the dark ceiling, listening so hard my ears rang. A voice spoke softly, "Merry Christmas." It wasn't shouted, it wasn't whispered. It was said the way someone speaks when they're close enough to not need volume. I bolted upright and flicked on the lamp. The room was empty. I searched every corner, the closet, under the bed. Nothing. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. I didn't sleep after that. Morning came, pale and gray. Christmas Day. I convinced myself I'd dreamed it. Stress. Imagination, being alone too long. I even laughed about it. That night, the power went out. No storm, no warning, just darkness. I grabbed my flashlight phone and went downstairs to check the breaker. Everything was fine, every switch untouched. When I turned around, the living room was glowing. Soft, warm light poured in through the front window. Christmas lights. I froze. They were wrapped around the railing outside. Perfectly placed, neatly plugged in, blinking slowly. We didn't own Christmas lights. I backed away from the window. That's when I saw the reflection. Someone was standing behind me, tall, still, head tilted slightly, like they were studying my reaction. I spun around. Nothing. But the lights outside began blinking faster. I ran upstairs, locked myself in my room, and called my parents again and again. No signal. No connection. Then I heard the footsteps again. This time they came up the stairs. One step, pause, another step. Each footfall slow, careful, like they were making sure the floor didn't creak. They stopped outside my door. A shadow slid across the crack beneath it. The handle didn't turn. Instead, a hand tapped the door lightly. Once, twice, a voice followed, the same calm tone as before. "You forgot to thank me for the lights." I screamed. I don't remember much after that, only that the knocking stopped, and at some point, exhaustion pulled me into darkness. When I woke, sunlight filled the room. The power was back. The house was silent. My parents arrived an hour later. They found me sitting on the bed, shaking. They searched the house, found nothing except for one thing. A single Christmas ornament sat on the kitchen table. A red glass bulb inside it. Etched faintly into the glass were words so small I almost missed them. "Next year, don't sleep alone."
I never liked Christmas carolers. Most people think they're harmless. Awkward smiles, off-key singing, maybe a little annoying at worst. But something about strangers standing in the dark, singing at your door, always felt wrong to me. That feeling turned into certainty the Christmas I spent alone. My parents had driven out of state to visit relatives. I stayed behind because of work. Just one night alone in the house, I told myself. One quiet Christmas Eve. The neighborhood was older. New England-style homes, narrow streets, tall trees that blocked out most of the streetlights. Snow had been falling since late afternoon, coating everything in white and making the world eerily quiet. I locked the doors, checked the windows, turned on the tree lights and the TV for background noise. The house felt empty, but manageable. At around 9 p.m., the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. 5 people stood on my porch, all adults, all wearing long coats and scarves pulled high around their necks. Their faces were pale in the porch light, eyes shadowed. They stood too close together, shoulder to shoulder, perfectly still. No one smiled. Before I could decide what to do, they began to sing. It was a Christmas carol I recognized, but the tempo was wrong. Slower, drawn out. Each note held just a little too long, like they were stretching it. I didn't open the door. I didn't speak. I just stood there, holding my breath. The singing didn't stop. Minutes passed. My arms started to ache from standing still. I glanced through the peephole again. None of them had moved. Their mouths opened and closed in perfect unison. Their eyes stared forward, unblinking. I stepped back and turned off the porch light. The singing stopped instantly. Relief washed over me, sharp and sudden. Then the singing started again, inside the house. Soft first, faint, like it was coming from the walls themselves. I spun around. The sound drifted through the hallway, moving slowly, as if walking room to room. I ran upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom. My heart hammered so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The singing grew clearer, closer, right outside my door. I pressed my hands over my ears. It didn't help. The voices weren't loud. They were intimate, close enough that I could hear breath between the words. I could hear the wet movement of lips forming syllables. Then they stopped. Silence settled heavy and thick. A single voice spoke, softly. We practiced all year. I screamed. The door handle turned once, stopped, then knocked. Slow, polite taps, 3 of them. I backed into the corner of the room, clutching my phone, calling 911 with shaking hands. The call connected, but all I could hear was singing on the line, not the dispatcher, the carol. The door began to shake, not violently, gently, like someone testing it. Then everything went quiet. The call dropped. I didn't sleep. When morning came, the house was untouched, doors locked, windows sealed. No sign anyone had been there, except outside. Footprints covered the yard, hundreds of them, all facing the house, none leading away. On the porch sat a small, neatly wrapped gift. Inside was a CD, handwritten on it in careful letters, "Next year, please sing with us." I moved out 2 weeks later. Every Christmas since, my phone rings once at exactly midnight. When I answer, I hear singing. I grew up believing Christmas was the safest night of the year. Nothing bad was supposed to happen when the world smelled like pine and cinnamon, when houses glowed warm against the cold, when families stayed inside together. That belief died the year my mother insisted we keep the curtains open. We lived in a small town in northern Wisconsin, surrounded by trees and long, empty roads. Winters were brutal, snowbanks taller than cars, nights that felt endless. People locked themselves inside early and stayed there. Our house sat a little farther back from the road than the others, not hidden, but isolated enough that headlights passed by without really touching us. On Christmas Eve, my mom said it felt wrong to close the house off. "Let the light out," she said. "It's Christmas." My dad didn't argue. He rarely did, so the curtains stayed open. By evening, snow was falling hard, thick flakes drifting sideways in the wind. The living room glowed with tree lights and candles. The TV played quietly in the background. Everything felt calm, almost too calm. That was when I noticed the man. At first, I thought it was a shadow from the trees, something darker than the night, standing just beyond the reach of the porch light. Then he moved, just a slight shift of weight, enough to tell me it wasn't part of the landscape. I leaned forward on the couch, squinting through the glass. He stood at the edge of our yard, not close, not far, just far enough that his face was hidden by darkness, but his shape was clear, tall, thin, wearing something long and dark that blended into the night. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was a neighbor, someone walking their dog, someone lost. But he didn't walk. He just stood there, watching. Minutes passed. The TV laughed. The tree lights blinked softly. My parents talked quietly at the table behind me. The man didn't move. I finally told my dad. He stood, walked to the window, and frowned. "There's no one there," he said. I looked again. The yard was empty. Snow undisturbed. No footprints. I felt stupid, embarrassed. I apologized and sat back down. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been taken from me in that moment. Like I'd blinked and missed something important. Later that night, after dinner, after gifts, after the house settled into that peaceful Christmas quiet, I saw him again. This time, he was closer, standing just beyond the porch, close enough that the light touched him. His clothes were old, a long coat, too thin for the weather, no hat, no gloves, snow gathered on his shoulders, unmelted, like he'd been there a long time. I could see his face now. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning. He was expressionless, staring directly into the house, at me. I froze. My mom followed my gaze and gasped. My dad stood up fast, anger replacing confusion. He grabbed his phone and moved toward the door. The man raised one hand, slowly, not to wave, to press it flat against the glass. His palm left a mark, clear and wet, like the window was warm, and he was very cold. My dad yanked the door open. The porch was empty. Cold air rushed in, carrying snow and silence. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. My dad locked the door and closed the curtains. We didn't talk about it. That night, I woke up to the sound of scraping, soft, rhythmic, like fingers dragging across glass. I opened my eyes and saw light spilling into my room. The curtains were open. I was sure I had closed them. Outside my bedroom window, inches from the glass, a man stood. His face was fully visible now, pale, veins dark beneath thin skin, eyes wide and unblinking. He leaned forward until his forehead touched the window. His mouth opened slowly, and he mouthed words without sound. I shook my head violently, backing away, screaming for my parents. The man's lips curled upward, not into a smile, but into something close enough to feel wrong. Then he stepped back and vanished into the snow. My parents searched the house, the yard, the road, nothing. But beneath my window, the snow was packed down, not footprints, kneeling marks, as if he'd been there a long time, watching, waiting. The next morning, Christmas Day, police came and went. They found no evidence. No neighbors reported anything unusual. We tried to move on. We failed. That night, just before midnight, every light in the house turned on at once. Every room, every lamp, every decoration. The curtains opened themselves. Outside, across the yard, dozens of figures stood in the snow, all tall, all thin, all wearing long, dark coats, all staring into the house. And in the center, closest to the porch, stood the man from the window. He raised his hand again. This time, he waved. The power cut out. When it came back, the yard was empty, but every window in the house was marked with handprints from the outside.